Hi, I'm Zelma, and I bought my mother a $3,000 hearing aid after her surgery. I wiped her floors, changed her bandages, skipped sleep to sit by her bedside, and on Thanksgiving, she looked me dead in the eye and called me ungrateful. That word didn't just hurt, it rewrote history. Because behind the mimosas and polite smiles, my sister had erased me from the will, the family chat, and even my mother's heart, all while smiling like nothing was wrong. They thought I wouldn't find out, but I did. And when I did, I didn't scream. I documented. I recorded. I filed. So tell me, how do you forgive a family that watched you break and called it love? I pulled into my mother's driveway just as daylight waned, the sky a pale gray stretched thin across Houston's suburbs. The house smelled like roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and sweet pies that glowed in the windows. I carried 2 trays of mashed potatoes, a pecan pie, and what I hoped would feel like peace disguised as care. Earlier in the week, I'd slipped quietly into an upscale hearing clinic, choosing a $3,000 aid that promised clarity, warmth, possibility. I bought it because I believed she deserved to hear me. Finally. As I stepped through the kitchen door, laughter and hugs greeted me. I set the trays down, wiping my hands on my jeans, trying not to let my heart speed up. Mother, Lorena, smiled and kissed me on the cheek. Isolda, her eldest, glided by in a dress that caught the lamplight, radiant and sure. And for a moment, I thought, maybe this time things will be different. The dining room was arranged beautifully, polished silverware, soft candlelight, wine glasses that caught reflections of pumpkins and fall leaves. I looked for my name card on the table, expecting it at the seat facing the fireplace, the place I'd always thought belonged to me. There were Mother, Isolda, Daxton, Grandma June, even Cousin Ellie, everyone but me. I paused, forced a breath. Guests murmured about Thanksgiving traditions, about gratitude. I kept quiet. It didn't feel like quietness, though. It felt like erasure. My niece, shy and 4 years old, tugged on my sleeve. Aunt Zelma, would you like this folding chair? She pointed at a corner where a chair leaned stacked behind others. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, moving to claim the spot as though stepping into someone else's shadow. Later, warm light dimmed into golden dusk. Mother raised her glass for the toast. The family bowed heads, murmured grace, the hum of candles and chandeliers. When she spoke, she praised Isolda, my eldest daughter, who always goes above and beyond. She smiled, proud. Then she turned to me. Her voice softened, but the words landed hard. I just wish you could learn to be more grateful, like your sister. A hush swallowed the room. Warm laughter died out. The clink of a fork against a plate sounded sharp. I felt my hand tremble. My heart dipped into cold water. I remembered the hearing aid, paid in full after nights I held my breath over the cost. I remembered slipping in late charges, delaying vacations in order to buy it. And yet, at this table of gratitude, I appeared ungrateful. I forced a smile, answering the toast with a slow nod. My appetite vanished. The food turned dry in my mouth. My throat felt raw. I took small bites, each chew tasting of shame. Years of being the helpful one, the quiet one, the one who always fixed things, the one they leaned on but never clearly saw, collapsed inside me. Memories flashed, the hospital room when I helped Mom adjust her pillows, the nights I stayed up, reading to her when her ears rang, the mornings I cleaned her bandages, small disguises of love. I'd done all that without fanfare, without speaking up, because love, I believed, sometimes meant silence, because I thought maybe earning love mattered more than demanding it. As the meal wound down, dessert plates cleared, conversation thinning, I slipped from his place at the table. I walked to the coat rack, hands shaking slightly. My ears buzzed from the hearing aid I'd brought, now lying untouched in its velvet case inside my bag. Someone's voice, Cousin Rebecca, said, "Wait, weren't you the one who bought the hearing aid?" It was quiet, but enough for everyone to hear. I didn't respond. I just stood there, feeling the weight of all the invisible moments pressing against my ribs. No one noticed when I slipped out of the dining room, but I wasn't going to disappear quietly anymore. My chair was still warm from where I had been sitting, but I left it behind like a shell I'd finally outgrown. As I crossed the hallway, the noise of family laughter followed me, rolling through the open doors in waves, warm to anyone else, but to me, suffocating. The sound filled the air with something sticky, clinging, as though joy itself was conspiring to choke me. I paused at the threshold of the kitchen. Dishes hummed in the dishwasher, steam curling faintly upward, while sunlight slanted through the wide window, catching the dust motes that spun like tiny golden confetti. The whole scene looked serene, almost picturesque, but I could feel the hollowness underneath. I lifted a hand to my cheek, brushing away a tear that had escaped despite my will. It wasn't supposed to fall. Not here. Not where someone might see. At the sink, I rinsed the gravy boats under scalding hot water, watching the greasy remnants swirl down the drain. Every drop seemed to echo inside my chest. I could still taste the burnt edges of pumpkin pie. The sweetness turned bitter, mixed with the salt of the tears I'd swallowed at the table. From the living room, the clatter of plates and silverware rose, followed by voices, laughter, teasing, harmless jokes. To anyone else, it was the sound of family. To me, it was the sound of exclusion. I stacked silverware carefully, aligning each fork and spoon as though order might bring steadiness to my breath. My hands moved automatically, but my chest still burned. I didn't want anyone to walk in and see me cracking, didn't want my vulnerability to become another story told at my expense. Then I heard Mother's voice, rising clearly above the chorus of children's giggles and the soft strains of jazz floating from the old stereo. "I feel so blessed tonight," she said. Her words were measured, bright, carrying through the house. And then came the dagger. "Especially to have Isolde, who does everything." Applause erupted. Glasses clinked. I froze. My name hung absent, dangling in the silence where it might have belonged. Through the doorway, I saw Isolde's smile, perfect, polished. She clasped Mother's hand with devotion, brushing a stray strand of hair from her temple. Her eyes shimmered with humility, practiced enough to be convincing. For a moment, I thought, that should have been me. Not a moment later, Isolde stood, her laptop balanced in her hands. She claimed the center of the living room with ease, like she had been waiting for this coronation. She clicked through a slideshow of photographs. Isolde helping Mother into bed after surgery. Isolde serving tea on the back porch. Isolde wrapping a shawl around her shoulders during autumn walks. In every image, Isolde was framed as caretaker, heroine, savior. I searched desperately for myself, scanning each frame as though my face might have been allowed a corner. But I wasn't there, not once. There were no shots of my hands cleaning bandages, no pictures of the nights I pressed cool cloths against her forehead when the fever rose, no frame of me sitting quietly by her bedside while monitors beeped in the dark. Even the video clip of Thanksgiving Eve, when I had stirred pots and peeled vegetables in the kitchen, had been cut so that only Isolde's voice remained. My humming in the hallway, my footsteps across the tile, erased. My hands trembled as I turned away from the doorway. The sweet smell of the casserole we'd baked that afternoon, marshmallows browned, sugar caramelized, suddenly made my stomach twist. I leaned hard on the sink, watching the water spiral into the drain, the surface trembling as though it knew my secret. Memory rose unbidden. Nights when I sat beside her hospital bed, reading old family stories to soothe her while the machines pulsed and buzzed too loudly. Towels I changed quietly, sheets I replaced when she was too weak to move. The night I curled up on the couch outside her door because she said she couldn't hear the alarm and I didn't trust anyone else to wake. None of it had been filmed, none of it performed. But it had been love. Real love. I dried my hands, brushed crumbs from my sleeve, and walked barefoot down the carpeted hallway. The rug muffled my steps, but I carried the weight of each one. I found the guest bathroom and closed the door softly behind me. The mirror was fogged slightly from the steam of earlier showers. My reflection looked back at me with eyes rimmed red, but not with shame. Not this time. Shame had visited me often before, pulling me under, convincing me to swallow silence. What I felt now was different. Anger wrapped in sorrow, sharpened into something I could hold. I placed both hands on the countertop, the cool surface grounding me. I leaned in toward the glass, my breath fogging it more. "I'll remember this," I whispered, not as a threat, but as a promise to myself. After a few minutes, I stepped back into the hallway. The living room was dimmer now, the candles burning low, their wax dripping unevenly. The slideshow had ended. Applause rose again, warm and unthinking. Isolde closed her laptop with a soft click. Her eyes swept the room, landing on me at the edge of the doorway. She tilted her head, her smile too smooth, and asked, "Would you like a copy?" The words were meant to include me, to seem generous, but they only twisted the knife deeper. I met her gaze, my throat tight. I swallowed hard, then spoke evenly. "No, I lived the parts you cut out." The room flickered with surprise. Heads turned. Mother's face tightened in shock, her hand halfway to her glass. Isolde's smile faltered, just slightly, like a mask slipping. A cousin shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The applause stuttered and fell into silence, and in that silence, something stirred in me. The first fragile thread of permission, not from them, but from myself. Permission to refuse this erasure. For the first time in years, I had chosen not to vanish. They might have erased me from the photo, but I was about to become unforgettable. Later that night, after the dishes had been washed and the laughter had trickled into the quieter hum of tired voices, I stood alone in the hallway. My steps were slow, almost reverent, as I made my way toward the staircase landing where the family's history was displayed frame by frame. The golden glow of the foyer chandelier poured soft light onto the wall, casting long, broken shadows. Each frame seemed to whisper someone else's story, none of them mine. I paused there, taking in the smell of the house. A faint trace of Mother's perfume drifted down from the upstairs hallway window. A floral sweetness, as though she had just passed by, though I knew she hadn't. The scent clung like memory, sharp and uninvited. Then I heard her voice. Mom stood in the doorway of the living room, her arms folded loosely across her chest. Her tone was light, almost careless, but it hit me like a stone tossed into a still pond. "Thanks for helping out, Maribel," she said. I froze. Maribel. The name of the housekeeper who had worked for us years ago, when I was still in high school. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My pulse hammered in my ears, my back stiffened, and I forced air into my lungs. "Oh," she corrected herself quickly, brow furrowing. "Sorry, I meant Zelma." Zelma, the neighbor who sometimes dropped in to help with groceries. Another woman who wasn't me. Her correction didn't warm the wound. If anything, it carved it deeper. Names are anchors, and mine had been cut loose, left drifting in her mouth until she grasped for someone else's. I nodded faintly, sucking in a breath that scraped my throat, and said nothing. The silence between us felt louder than any reply I might have given. I moved past her without looking back, my footsteps sinking into the carpet, carrying me toward the wall of framed memories. There it was, the wall that told the story of us, or more accurately, the story of everyone but me. My fingers hovered above the glossy wood frames before finally landing on one, Isolde's wedding portrait. She stood radiant, her hand wrapped around a champagne flute, her new husband's arm encircling her waist. Dad was in the background, mid-toast, his face alight with pride. The whole moment captured like a painting. Perfect, preserved, but not me. I scanned the rest of the wall, rows of smiling faces through decades of milestones, graduations, vacations, Christmas mornings, birthdays. Isolde's achievements carefully framed, displayed like trophies. Photos of Daisy, the family dog, in holiday sweaters, chasing frisbees, curled in Isolde's lap. Even Daxton, a cousin who only visited once a year, had his smile enshrined here with his children beside him. My graduation photo. Missing. My birthdays. Absent. The nights I held Mom's hand during her illness. The evenings I cooked meals alone in the kitchen while the others gathered. Gone. My image had been quietly, thoroughly erased. I leaned closer, so close my breath fogged the glass of one of the frames. Dust had settled along the edge of a brass plaque. The Thompson family. The words gleamed faintly in the low light, etched in permanence, but they were incomplete. A family, yes, but one without my voice. I pressed my palm flat against the glass. It was cold beneath my skin. A memory surfaced suddenly, uninvited. Graduation day. I remembered standing outside the auditorium in my cap and gown, the tassels swinging in the wind. Mom had hugged me tightly that day, pride flooding her face. I gave her a framed photo of us, her and me together, smiling side by side, her arm draped over my shoulders. She had said I looked beautiful, that I had finally grown into myself. We laughed, we cried. That picture had hung in my apartment for a while, but when I moved back home for a few months, I brought it with me. I left it here, thinking she might hang it on this very wall. Last year, I found it in the garage, half buried under an old quilt in a cardboard box labeled miscellaneous. Mom had promised she'd move it upstairs tomorrow, but tomorrow never came. The hollowness in my chest spread, filling me until I thought I might drown in it. Slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the camera app and held it steady in front of me. The wall of photos filled the screen. I took the shot. The shutter clicked quietly, almost like a whisper. I stared at the glowing image in my hand. Proof. Proof that I had been written out without protest. Proof that erasure could happen without anyone needing to shout. I tapped "Send to Self" and typed a note in the subject line. Proof. Some stories are erased without screaming. Later, back in my apartment, the city wrapped itself around me like a different kind of silence. The streets outside glowed under the dim hum of street lamps, their light spilling in fractured grids across my window pane. I brewed tea in the small kitchen, letting the steam curl upward into the darkness. I opened my laptop, the screen lighting my face, and started to type. The subject line of the email read, "Things they'll never believe." I wrote about the wall of photos, about Mom misnaming me, first Maribel, then Zelma, about the quiet labor I had given that no one acknowledged, about the care that had gone unseen. I described the nights at the hospital, the meals prepared, the hours lost in service of a family that never looked back at me. When I finished, I didn't send it. I couldn't, not yet. Instead, I saved it as a draft. My words waited there, frozen, but they belonged to me, not them, not anymore. I closed the laptop, the sound sharp in the silence. Just then, my phone pinged. A notification from social media. I picked it up. Isolde had posted a new photo. A group shot taken after Thanksgiving dinner. Faces beamed at the camera, hands lifted in mid-toast, desserts scattered across the table. Bright, perfect. I stared. My stomach dropped. I wasn't in the frame. I hadn't been tagged, hadn't been acknowledged, hadn't even been invited into the image. The screen blurred in my hands as the warm lights of the dining room glowed behind them, mocking me with their shine. My absence wasn't an accident. It was a choice. I set the phone down carefully on the table, but my chest ached as though I had been struck. I realized then, with a clarity that felt almost electric, they weren't just ignoring me. They were editing reality itself, cutting me from the story, as though I had never existed. But what they didn't know was that I had already begun speaking. Even if my words hadn't left the draft folder, even if my proof lived only in the cloud and in the quiet whispers of my own mind, I had spoken. And silence, when carried with purpose, was louder than they could ever imagine. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't neglect. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a plan. I arrived at my mother's house one late weekday afternoon, a canvas grocery bag cutting into my shoulder. Inside were small things, tokens of care I had chosen deliberately. Fresh green beans bundled in twine, soft dinner rolls from the bakery downtown, and a jar of apricot jam I knew she liked on her toast. The December sky hung dim and heavy above me, the kind of gray that presses down on your chest. The light faded faster these days, slipping away before you were ready. I parked under the wide oak trees that bordered the drive. Their branches were almost bare, leaves rattling in the cold wind. The gusts chased me up the front path, tugging at my coat. I knocked gently, hesitant even though this was my childhood home. The door opened with a low creak. Mother stood there in her robe, the TV murmuring a daytime soap from the living room. A thin strand of her hair had slipped loose, falling over her shoulder. She nodded, the movement small, not quite a smile. No warmth in her eyes. "You're here earlier than I thought," she said. "I just wanted to check on the hearing aid," I replied, keeping my voice even, steady. "See how it's working for you." But inside, I braced myself. The kitchen was warm, heavy with the smell of tomato soup and biscuits left on the stove. I set the groceries down on the marble counter, the sound of jars and bags soft against the stone. My eyes drifted to the hearing aid case sitting unopened on the island, still sealed in its plastic wrap. My throat constricted, a knot forming that I swallowed back. I pulled off my gloves and slipped them into my coat pocket. My hands went to the sink, to the dishes left from lunch. I washed a pan, the hot water biting against my cold fingers. I moved through the motions of tidying, opening drawers, brushing crumbs into my palm, wiping counters. The rhythm calmed me. It also gave me cover. From my coat pocket, I pulled the folded receipt. $3,000. Money I had worked for, sacrificed for. I laid it on the countertop, half hidden behind the sugar bowl, but clear enough that she'd see it when she sat down. I smoothed it flat, then left it there like a silent offering. Mother glanced over from her chair. Her eyes landed on the receipt. Her lips parted as if she might say something, but instead, she turned her head back toward the TV. On screen, a character cried, melodrama filling the space. I dropped the clean pan into the sink, the clang echoing too loud, and turned away. No words. None came. Later, while she dozed lightly in her chair, I sat at the kitchen table and checked my phone. A new email sat in my inbox, an insurance renewal alert. Health insurance for Mother. My name was on the billing line, as always, but when I opened the details, my stomach dropped. Under family contact and sponsor, the name was clear. Isolde. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, stared again. Isolde. How many times had I been the one on the phone with the agents, explaining coverage, asking questions, filling out endless forms? How many hours had I sat on hold, making sure she was cared for? And yet, my name was nowhere. I called the provider, my voice calm, precise. "Who is listed as the primary contact on this account?" I asked. "Isolde," the representative replied without hesitation. "And the billing?" "Billed under your name," they confirmed. I pressed further. "Why the discrepancy?" "Probably just an administrative oversight," they said lightly. But I knew better. Oversights don't repeat themselves. Oversights don't erase you so neatly. When I got home later that night, I printed the email and slid it into a blue folder I kept locked in my car. The cover was marked in neat block letters. Family Audit. Inside were all the small betrayals I had collected. Documents, receipts, clipped emails. Every page was a piece of the puzzle I hadn't wanted to see, but could no longer ignore. I stuck a yellow sticky note to the new page. This will be useful later. Not written in anger, not a threat, just certainty. Quiet felt stronger than fury. On the drive back to my apartment, dusk deepened into night. Streetlights flickered on, halos of orange light pooling against the asphalt. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat, but I didn't reach for it. Instead, I turned it off, letting the silence settle around me. Better to let my thoughts breathe. Later, sitting on the edge of my bed, boots kicked off by the door, jacket draped over the chair, I reflected, love doesn't have to destroy your dignity. Loyalty doesn't require erasure. For years, I had held my tongue, convinced that silence was patience, that invisibility was sacrifice. That maybe, just maybe, if I stayed quiet long enough, someone would notice. But hope is fragile, and every day, someone had hung another mask over my truth. The next day, I returned to Mother's house, folder in hand. She was in the kitchen again, her robe tied loosely, the morning light making her look smaller somehow. She was flipping through papers, brow furrowed, lips pressed together. My pages, my proof. I paused in the doorway, the smell of coffee and biscuits lingering in the air. My hand tightened on the doorknob. She looked up slowly, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment, there was something like recognition in her gaze, though it wavered. "Did you want me to thank you for that thing?" she asked, her voice low, almost uncertain. The words struck harder than I expected. My heart thudded, not for want of thanks, but for the ache of being seen at last, however faintly. I turned fully toward her. I looked softly but steady, my voice quiet. No, I didn't want thanks. I wanted you to hear me. But I guess that was never the issue. I left the papers on the counter, quiet but deliberate, like a promise unspoken. The wind rattled the kitchen window. Outside, dry leaves scraped across the sidewalk, tumbling aimlessly with the gusts. I walked away. I didn't look back. If they didn't want me to act like family, then they shouldn't have expected me to stay silent like one. It was a cold Saturday morning in early December when I stood outside my mother's front door, the sky heavy with thick, gray cloud cover. The daylight was pale, the kind of light that barely reaches the ground, as though winter wanted to keep the world dim. My boots crunched over fallen leaves on the walkway, the sound brittle and sharp. In my hands I carried small offerings, a bouquet of poinsettias wrapped in paper, and a loaf of sourdough bread still warm from the bakery. They were gestures, symbols of care, but also shields. I told myself to keep my voice even, my posture steady. My heart, surprisingly, was calmer than it had been in weeks. From inside came the sound of laughter, glassware clinking against one another, the faint hiss of a champagne cork. I paused on the porch and looked through the wide kitchen window. There she was, Isolde, moving with perfect ease, pouring mimosas into tall flutes. Sunlight filtered in through the sheer curtains, catching the bubbles in the glasses. She adjusted the tablecloth, brushed crumbs from the counter, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She looked every inch the lady of the house. The kitchen smelled of orange peel, cinnamon, and sizzling bacon. Brunch was almost ready. I swallowed the lump in my throat and opened the door with a gentle smile. I set the bread and flowers down on the counter. Mother gave me a small nod from her chair, but her eyes slid away almost instantly. A flash of light caught my eye. The glint of her new hearing aid, adjusted, polished, sitting neatly in place. She had it because of me. Yet her gaze avoided mine, as though gratitude were dangerous ground. We exchanged pleasantries, polite phrases that skimmed the surface but never went deeper. I helped set the table, laid out butter knives, arranged the fruit salad, folded napkins. Someone joked about the weather. Another cousin laughed about holiday travel plans. I laughed too, though it caught in my throat. My ears, however, weren't tuned to the conversation. I was listening beneath it, watching the currents of what went unsaid. I had learned that sometimes silence is the loudest thing you carry. As the hours passed, the house filled with more voices. Cousins, nephews, in-laws. The living room swelled with chatter and laughter. The walls vibrated with their energy, though it never seemed to include me. At one point, I slipped into the hallway bathroom to fetch allergy tablets that Mom sometimes needed this time of year. I opened the mirrored cabinet, careful not to disturb the bottles of lotion and aspirin inside. That's when I saw it, a thick manila envelope tucked in the back, nearly hidden. The label across the front was unmistakable, Updated Living Trust. My chest tightened. I slid it out carefully, fingers trembling. The flap was sealed, but a printed sheet on the outside told enough. My name, Zelma, wasn't there. Not as a contact, not as a recipient, not as anything. In bold type, only one name appeared. Isolde, sole inheritor, primary caregiver. The room seemed to tilt. I tucked the envelope back into the cabinet and returned to the dining room, but the world felt muffled. I sat, fork halfway to my mouth, plate untouched. My vision swam as I heard Mother's voice rise above the chatter. "Family means everything," she said brightly, raising her glass. The room echoed with agreement. Glasses clinked, laughter rippled. The words struck me like a cruel joke. My stomach knotted. Betrayal seared me from the inside. I thought of the nights I had driven her to checkups after surgery, the long evenings I sat at her bedside, the bills I'd handled with meticulous care, invisible work, love without recognition. And now even the future, the legal record of who she was leaving behind, had been signed away without me. Just then, a small voice broke through my storm. My nephew, barely a toddler, tugged at the hem of my dress. His wide brown eyes sparkled with innocence as he asked, "Aunt Zelma, are you the helper that takes care of Grandma?" The table stilled. Conversation faltered. Someone coughed. I saw Isolde pause mid-pour, the mimosa glass suspended in her hand. Mother's eyes flickered downward, not meeting mine. I closed my jaw, swallowed hard, and knelt to tie the boy's shoes. My hands shook only slightly as I steadied the laces. "I help," I said softly. I didn't correct him. I couldn't. The word helper stretched between us, holding all the weight of what I had done and all the distance of what I was denied. Later, I caught Isolde near the stairs, standing by the family photo wall where her face was framed in every significant milestone. I asked her quietly to step aside with me. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady, not angry, just clear. "You know what's in that will is wrong," I said. Her shrug was practiced, careless. "You had your chance," she replied, voice almost bored. "You were never around." I nearly laughed then. Bitter, sharp, the sound of disbelief. Never around. I thought of every bill paid, every night spent, every sacrifice folded into silence. But I didn't laugh out loud. Instead, I held her gaze and said, "That narrative stops now. No shouting, no accusations, just truth." Mother appeared in the doorway, her hand absently adjusting the dial on her hearing aid. Her face looked pale in the dim light. She didn't defend me. She didn't cry. She simply turned her eyes away, as though distance was easier than choosing sides. The light from the window cut across her face, illuminating the dust that drifted lazily in the air. Before leaving, I turned to her. My words were quiet, but deliberate. "You can choose to cut me out," I said. "Just don't expect me to keep playing loyal." Her hands trembled slightly. She touched her hearing aid, as if it might make the moment clearer. She said nothing. The only reply was the hush of the room, punctuated by the distant laughter of my nephew in the living room. I took a deep breath, the kind that settles in your bones. Then I reached for my coat hanging by the door. As I slipped one sleeve on, Mother spoke softly. "I don't want fighting." I paused, the coat half on, half off. I turned back toward her, my voice level. "Then you should have stopped them a long time ago." I finished pulling on my coat and opened the door. The cold air struck me instantly, crisp and sharp against my skin. The wind rattled the trees in the yard, shaking loose the last stubborn leaves. They scraped along the sidewalk, chasing one another like secrets trying to escape. I walked down the steps, each footfall certain. I didn't look back. If they wanted war, then I would fight, but not on their battlefield. I would choose my own. 2 weeks before Christmas, I woke to a morning wrapped in silence. Frost clung thickly to my car windshield, the kind that turns glass into a milky haze until scraped away. My apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't soothe but pressed down on my chest heavier than any conversation ever could. I moved through the routine of morning, forcing normalcy into my limbs. I ground coffee beans, boiled water, let steam rise in pale curls from the cup. But as I carried it to my desk, the heat did nothing to melt the cold gathering in me. On the desk sat the stack of folders I had been avoiding, thick, uneven, threatening. I pulled them closer. Receipts, hospital bills, logs of grocery trips, notations of when I changed bandages, picked up prescriptions, handled errands. Each paper whispered the same brutal refrain: "You've been doing this work alone." That afternoon, I unlocked my phone and tapped into the family group chat, the one I had created years ago in a fit of optimism, thinking a digital thread would weave us closer. I scrolled through the most recent messages, photos from my niece's birthday party, balloons bobbing in the backyard of Mom's house. The cake was frosted pink, the children laughing around a table full of presents. I hadn't been invited. What cut deeper was seeing the images of gifts I recognized. A toy train I had bought weeks earlier, a hand-painted ornament I'd spent hours on. Both in the pile, both photographed proudly. My name wasn't mentioned. No one tagged me. My absence echoed louder than any presence could. I exhaled slowly, shoulders sinking, a long breath meant to clear space inside me. But what rose instead was something sharp, certain. Enough. I closed the chat. I set the phone face down on the desk. Then I pulled the folders closer and began arranging the contents with deliberate care. Insurance statements, bank transfers, grocery receipts, medication lists, screenshots of text threads where I checked in again and again. I organized them into neat piles. Order gave me strength. Then I turned to my laptop, typing into the search bar with fingers that trembled only slightly. Texas elder care rights, inheritance law, caregiver, credit documentation. Each page I opened, each link I bookmarked, was a step away from silence. I found a local law firm recommended by a helpline for senior care issues. Their website was simple, trustworthy. Framed photos of attorneys, a mission statement about protecting the overlooked. I hovered over the Contact Us button, my cursor blinking. It felt like stepping across a line I had drawn in cement long ago. By dusk, I sat in a small attorney's office downtown. The waiting area smelled faintly of leather and old books, the walls lined with diplomas and framed certificates. The woman who met me was calm, steady, her hair streaked with gray. Her eyes were sharp, but kind. I spread my evidence across her desk, page after page. I explained how I paid bills, how I picked up prescriptions, stayed overnight after surgeries, drove to appointments. How I never asked for credit or praise, only acknowledgement. My voice didn't shake. It was measured, steady, like I'd rehearsed this testimony my whole life. She listened carefully, taking notes on a yellow pad. Finally, she slid a folder across the desk. "You have more than a case," she said quietly. "You have a pattern. What you're describing isn't chance, it's exclusion, but we'll need to document everything. Financial contributions, communication records, proof that you've been acting as caregiver." Her words settled into me like embers, glowing hot. Hope flickered, cautious but alive. Driving home, I kept both hands tight on the wheel. Bare tree branches shuddered in the wind, shadows clawing at the road. The cold air pressed hard against my windows, and I drove carefully, holding my breath. My thoughts spun in rhythm with the tires. What would Mother say if she knew? What would Isolde do if she realized I was no longer staying quiet? I pictured the walls they had built around my truth. Then I pictured the bricks in my folder, one by one, ready to knock those walls down. By nightfall, I was back in my apartment. I sat at the kitchen table, the wood scarred with scratches from years of use. A notebook lay open before me, pages already filled with dates and memories. I scrolled through old text threads with Mother, messages where I checked in, reminders I sent, photos I offered of meals I'd cooked or errands I'd run. All one-sided. The replies, when they came, were short, perfunctory. Nothing that ever named me, nothing that ever acknowledged my effort. I wrote in my journal, pen pressing hard against the paper. "It's not about the house. It's about my place in this family, or the lack of it." I paused, lifted my head, and stared out the frost-rimmed window at the streetlights glowing yellow in the dark. And then, the decision solidified. I would gather everything, every scrap of evidence, every note, every receipt, every proof of presence. I would build a case no one could erase. Later that evening, I drafted an email to Mother. I spelled it out plainly but gently. The caregiving I had done, the expenditures I had made, the hope I still carried for fairness. I typed carefully, each sentence a truth I had long buried. When I finished, my fingers hovered over the send button. I stared at it, heart racing, and then I didn't send it. Instead, I saved it in a folder on my computer labeled Evidence. I let it sit there, quiet but undeniable, ready to be opened when the time came. Proof, unignorable. As I pushed away from the desk, my phone buzzed. A new notification. A Venmo request from Mother. $60 for grocery run Isolde made. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. My thumb hovered over pay. I didn't accept. I didn't decline. I simply deleted it, the screen going blank in my hand. The meaning was clear. To them, I was still just a tool, a source of money, of service, never of honor. I slid on my coat and stepped outside. The cold air hit me full in the face, sharp enough to sting. My boots sank into the thin layer of snow that had just begun to fall. The neighborhood was quiet, houses glowing faintly with Christmas lights, wreaths on doors. No laughter spilled into the street. No scent of food warmed the air. Just the hush of falling snow, soft and heavy, settling into the silence. I breathed deeply, the air cutting into my lungs, and felt a steadiness settle into my bones. The fight was coming. I could feel it. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I was ready. They tried to erase me from the family. I was about to erase their lies from the record. One crisp evening, a week before Christmas, I unlocked the front door of my apartment and found a plain white envelope slid under the mat. No return address. I stood there, keys in hand, chest tight. Something bad had happened. I knew it. Inside was a series of printouts from my phone, texts I'd sent Mother, replies I didn't remember, edited, highlighted, twisted to sound like I was unstable. One said I had accused Mother of neglect, another suggested I threatened to sue. None of it was accurate. My stomach sank. I pressed my palms to my face, rereading the lines. Always angry. You know how she is. You are too dramatic. Comments in bold, words cut off, context vanished. Who had done this? Why send it now? I retreated into the bathroom, flicked on the light. My reflection loomed in the mirror, red-rimmed eyes, hair falling forward. I splashed water on my face. I whispered, "Not again." Because yes, I had suffered humiliation before, but not like this. Not as though others were being handed a script where I was the villain. I wondered, how many cousins believed it? How many people whispered already? The next day, Oregon called. A cousin's voice, one I used to trust, cracked. "I heard you're trying to take Grandma's house away," she said. She paused, probably waiting. I felt a sharp punch in my chest. "That's not true," I said, voice low. She hesitated. "Well, people are talking," she said softly, before hanging up. I sat in my car outside my apartment complex, hands on the steering wheel, breathing cold air in, rage laced with heartbreak. They were building the case against me in whispers and assuming I would never defend myself. I called Mother, dialing her number with fingers that trembled. She answered, quiet. I asked, "Have you seen any of that letter or heard the rumors?" She said, "Isolde said you're under stress. Maybe you should rest." And then hung up, or at least disconnected with the soft click that felt like a door slamming. I stared at the phone. Betrayal feels like a cheap room. I closed my eyes. The house around me creaked with holiday lights and distant music. But inside, everything was numb. I reached for the family audit folder, printed evidence, journals, the hearing aid receipt, insurance docs. My attorney said patterns matter, so I built a timeline. November 24th, Thanksgiving, no name at table. November 25th, video edit. Dec 1st, updated will. Dec 8th, anonymous letter. Each date I penciled in what was done, by whom, as best I knew, who saw it. I typed, I printed, I filed, my hands steady this time. At home that evening, I found a quiet room in the apartment, lit only by soft lamplight. I opened my journal. I wrote, "If they wanted to push me over the edge, they picked the wrong cliff." I tore a photo from a holiday card, one where Isolde, Mother, and the grandkids are grouped tightly together in front of a Christmas tree. I taped it to the refrigerator with a note under it. "You're still here." My own reminder that I wasn't gone, even if they acted like I was. Then my phone buzzed. I looked. A message from my mother's attorney, time-stamped just that morning. An official envelope would arrive soon. My heart stuttered. The cruel part was, I didn't know whether to feel scared or victorious. Or both. I closed my eyes, pressed my fingers to the envelope. I braced myself, because this time the lie might already be in motion. But so is my answer. The truth set me free. But freedom came at a cost I never thought I'd have to pay. 4 days before Christmas, I sat in the cold car outside a beige building marked Family Mediation Center. The wind tugged at my coat, the street lamp pools splitting shadows. I clutched the folder on my lap, receipts, voice recordings, insurance statements, timelines. I inhaled. This was the moment. I pushed open the door. The lobby was sterile, muted, wood panels, faint peppermint scent, chairs arranged in neat rows. Isolde was already there, flawless in a blouse and skirt, hair done, hands folded, confidence taut. Mother sat quietly, frail but awake. The mediator, a tall woman in glasses, gestured to a room. I rose, folder in hand, step by step towards something I'd been fighting for since Thanksgiving. The air felt heavy, every breath counted. The mediator opened with ground rules: respect, honesty, listening. No interruptions. I nodded. Isolde did too, but I could see her eyes calculating. Mother's hands rested in her lap. I spoke, calm but firm. I've asked for this because the contributions I've made have been denied, edited out, erased. I placed my folder on the table. The mediator asked, "Are you ready to present evidence?" I nodded. My throat dry, but I could feel something trembling inside. Not fear, but resolve. Then came the mic drop moment. I hit play on the recording. Mother, recovering from surgery, voice thin but clear, saying, "Zelma is the only one who stayed every night. She saved me." The room dropped silent. I looked at Isolde. It was as if the walls had shifted under her. The mediator turned to her, voice gentle but firm. "This changes things." I could see denial flicker, surprise. Mother didn't speak. She just watched me. The light from the window cast her profile in soft lines. Her hearing aid glinted. Isolde tried to pivot. "She took advantage of Mom's weakness," she said, voice tight. I just stepped in when Zelma wasn't available." The mediator interjected. "Your mother appeared of sound mind when saying this." Isolde's face twisted, searching for a way out. Mother sat still, silent. Her eyes flicked to me, as though weighing truth against comfort. No words, just a tremor in her fingers. I stood, folder extended. "You all wanted to erase me, but you forgot I was the one holding the truth." I slid printed timelines, receipts, a notarized letter onto the table in front of the mediator. I paused, letting my voice carry. "I'm not asking for their love anymore, just the respect I earned." My chest felt tight, but my spine was straight. For once, I wasn't pleading, I was stating. The mediator nodded, taking my documents. Notes were made. Isolde's shoulders slumped. Mother's eyes glistened. The room hummed with tension, like a held breath. I could almost hear the cracking of old expectations, the breaking of unseen contracts. The mediator asked Isolde and Mother if they had anything to say. Isolde shook her head. Mother's eyes stayed level with mine a moment, then she looked away. A lifetime of unsaid truths filling the space between us. As the mediation session ended, Mother reached for my hand. For a heartbeat, I thought we might bridge the gap. But I stood up. I felt the weight of years in that gesture. I turned away. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just walked out. The cold air outside struck my cheeks, sharp and alive. Isolde stood there, mouth open, no words. That's the first time I saw hesitation in her. First time I felt a shift. The truth set me free. But freedom came at a cost I never thought I'd have to pay. Christmas morning light slanted through frost-rimmed windows at my apartment. Snow floated gently outside, muffling the world in white. I rose before dawn, made coffee in silence, set my table just for me, scrambled eggs, buttered toast, a single orange slice. Across from me, one chair stayed empty, not a mistake, a reminder. I poured cream slowly, steam curling. I looked at the empty chair as though I expected someone to fill it, but no one came. I reminded myself, I didn't need them to prove I belong. The plate before me and the silence beneath it spoke louder. I carried in my folder the papers that finally guaranteed my name in Mother's estate, not erased. My name, my presence. After breakfast, I unfolded an envelope I found earlier, slipped inside my mailbox. Mother's handwriting bowed across cream paper. I held it in both hands. I read, "Zelma, you gave me back my hearing, but I never listened. That's on me." My breath caught. I read further. I don't expect you to come back. I just wanted you to know I see you now. No apology in grand letters, no begging, just a confession. I wept quietly. I clutched the letter like a fragile bird for a moment. Then I stood by the window, looking out at children making snow angels down the street. Their laughter carried faint across the cold. I felt peace settle in my bones. Not all wounds heal fully, but some honesty is enough. I dried my eyes. A message from my attorney lit my phone. Settlement processed. Your name restored in the will. Relief washed over me. Sharp, sweet, real. No more feeling like I'd been written out of my own story. It isn't about money, it's about dignity. I placed the phone down, let my heart slow. I threw on my coat, boots, scarf, stepped outside. Crisp air kissed my cheeks. I walked to the local park, where old oak trees stood bare against the gray sky. Snow crunching underfoot, the world a hush. I passed benches frosted over, playground empty. I thought of my father, the one who used to call me my strong one when I was 8, when I scraped my knee, when I believed courage meant staying. I missed him so much. I whispered thanks to him for teaching me strength, for not letting me believe I was ever too small. I stood by a bench, hands in pockets, breath clouding. I looked up at sky turning lighter. The snowflakes landed softly on my coat. No one pushed me, no one demanded more. I was here, alive, worthy. Later at home, I hung a new photograph on my shelf, a candid selfie I'd taken just days ago. Me alone, in my favorite sweater, holding a mug of tea, soft smile. No one else in the frame. No need. It was a declaration. I am my own story. I am visible. I set down the mug. The room was quiet, not empty. My heart, too. I touched the photo and said to no one, "This is for me." Because this Christmas, there's no big family dinner, no fight, no erasure, just quiet and peace. And me, still standing. Sometimes, the people we fight hardest to love are the ones who teach us the most about self-respect. Zelma didn't win back a family. She reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her peace. And maybe that's the deeper victory we forget to look for. What would you have done in her place? Have you ever been labeled ungrateful for simply standing your ground? Let's talk about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more real stories that hit where it hurts and heals.